Good evening, everyone. Good morning, I guess. Another long day here. I am attorney Catherine Henry, and I wanted to come to you now to address the governor's most recent executive order. It's in front of me right here. Oh, here it is. Okay. So this is regarding Executive Order 2020-147. It's very lovely that it's got the title of masks. And I guess a few things that I want to point out about this. Okay, for those of you who are wondering, yes, I am a licensed attorney. Yes, I am an attorney admitted to practice in the state of Michigan, and the federal court in the Eastern District of Michigan and the federal court in the Western District of Michigan, and the Saginaw Chippewa Tribal Court and the United States Supreme Court. I've been in the legal field for 19 years. So hopefully that answers some basic questions about why I'm coming to you today with this. So if you look at her executive order, Governor Whitmer's executive order 2020-147, first of all, let's stop and think about that for a second. Executive Order 147. So, between 1993 and 2019, 605 executive orders were written in the state of Michigan. Between 1993 and 2019, that would be 26 years, 605 executive orders total were written by the various governors in the state of Michigan. Where is my brief? Okay, so as of the time we had 130, 6 of our executive orders from 2020 were not based on emergency powers. Those were actually based on legitimate executive branch restructuring types of things. But by and large, most of these orders are based on emergency powers. Interesting thing is that from 1993 through 2019, when Governor Whitmer was governor, of all the executive orders we had, only 25 ever had anything to do with emergency powers. But our governor has issued, at this point, far more than 130 executive orders specifically based on emergency powers. To me, that's a point worth making in and of itself. So, of course, in this order, Section 1, you are required to wear a face covering over your nose and mouth when you're in any indoor public space at all. 2, when you're outdoors and don't stay at least 6 feet away from people at all times. And 3, when you're riding in public transportation, including Uber or Lyft. So a few things I want you guys to keep in mind is that under Section 2 of this executive order, children under 5 years old do not have to wear the masks. Quite frankly, I think it's child abuse to have any child have to wear a mask. 2B, if you cannot medically tolerate a face covering, this does not apply to you. And at least she was smart enough to realize that There's no onus upon the individual person to have to self-identify or explain their medical condition in any way. They are just simply exempt. That's it. So keep in mind, if you are a business owner or you are a manager or an employee of an establishment that this might otherwise apply to, you cannot ask people what their medical condition is. Governor's own order doesn't allow you to do that. Also, at least a little bit of common sense was used here, because in subsection C, you can take your mask off while you're eating and drinking while seated at a food service establishment. So if you happen to try to eat or drink while you stand up, you have to somehow do that with your mask on. You are allowed to not wear your mask when you are exercising, when wearing a face covering would interfere with that activity. So when you are exercising and increasing your heart rate and needing the, oxygen of fresh air to help keep things moving, one would think that wearing a face covering at all would interfere with your ability to do that activity and to breathe. You don't have to wear a mask when you are receiving a service for which temporary removal of the face covering is necessary to perform the service. So if you're getting your hair cut, if you're, there's like something you're getting done to your face, clearly going to the dentist, things like that. This also acknowledges that you may be entering a business or receiving a service that you are then asked to temporarily remove the face covering for identification purposes. So COVID-19 is so bad and so scary that we need to wear masks, but it's totally okay to not wear the masks when we have to be identified. Does this apply when there's riots? Are they allowed to go then and stop the criminals from rioting and looting and requiring them to remove their masks so that we can identify them? That was a rhetorical question, but that was for you, Governor Whitmer. Actually, and Attorney General Dana Nessel, who apparently is going to try to go after people for not wearing masks, but somehow forgot to prosecute all of the people who have been rioting and burning down businesses and destroying businesses and homes and, all the stuff that doesn't belong to them, or brandishing firearms in the middle of streets, holding them at people, in the middle of downtown Lansing. Here's another one, though. In all seriousness here, 2G. If you are, and this is kind of ironic because it's taken her a long time to get this in here, when she's had sign language interpreters standing right next to her at all of these press conferences. But 2G says you're allowed to take your mask off when you are communicating with someone who is hearing impaired or otherwise disabled and where the ability to see the mouth is essential to communication. So let me tell you right now, if I go into your store or your restaurant or whatever you have, I'm going to ask you to take the mask off. Why? Because I have a disability. I actually have several disabilities. Not that anyone's allowed to ask me what they are, but one of my disabilities is that I'm hearing impaired. I actually read lips. One of the reasons why I hate Zoom calls, why I adamantly object to doing any kind of court hearings unless we're in the presence of in the courtroom in the presence of each other. Why I always like to make sure that the jury is on my hearing side and opposing counsel as well. So I would definitely be one of those people where I have a disability, and the ability to see the mouth is essential to communication. Now, for all of you smart Alecs out there who seem to think that, oh, no big deal, I can just pay attention to the sign language interpreters that are standing next to the governor in these kinds of press conferences, or I can bring one around with me. I don't actually know sign language. No one ever taught me. And guess what? In a normal society, I wouldn't need that because I've learned to cope on my own by reading lips. So I shouldn't have to go above and beyond that to simply be able to engage in normal communication, which any society needs to have. Oh, this continues. So those of you actively engaged in a public safety role, you also do not have to have your mask on. So that would be, as she writes in here, law enforcement, firefighters, emergency medical personnel. It's important to note that all of you, let's just talk about our law enforcement. When law enforcement goes around and they have, it's summer, we've had some really hot days, they have their bulletproof vests on, they have their undershirt, they have the uniform shirt over top. Most of them wear pants in the summer, some of them get to wear shorts. They have, everything on. It's already quite hot. And then we're telling them, well, Governor Whitmer is telling them, by the way, unless you were actively engaged in a public safety role, you have to wear a mask. Yes, please, let's make sure that our first responders and our police officers and everybody else, that they are, passing out and unable to perform their jobs effectively because they're wearing masks out in 95-degree weather while they're already wearing all that other stuff. So the interesting thing is, I would argue that when you're actively engaged in a public role, that means that you're on duty. So a police officer at any given moment could have to respond to something, whether it be a call on the radio or whether it's something in the vicinity of where he is physically. So, of course, that's not really defined here. If you are officiating at a religious service, you don't have to wear a mask. If you are giving a speech for broadcast or an audience, I have some smart-ass comments I'm trying to hold back. I self-identify as a person who speaks to people even though you can't see them. Like in the movie Sixth Sense? So just so that you're aware, if you see me anywhere in public, besides the fact that I'm qualified under these other areas for not having to wear a mask, I do self-identify as someone who speaks to dead people. So you might not be able to see them, but I'm constantly speaking with an audience. So I can't wear a mask. The interesting thing is, Section 3 then basically says that businesses are not allowed to provide service to a customer or allow a customer to even enter its premise unless the customer is wearing a face mask or face covering is required by this order. Well, good thing for me, I actually have several exceptions that would apply to me that I'm not allowed to wear or don't have to wear the face mask. It's interesting, though, how is it possible to you might want to tell Colette that I'm on because she's texting me. How is it possible for a business, an employee, a manager, an owner, to know whether they should let someone in or not? They could be actively engaged in a public safety role. They could be, depending on the scenario or what the location of this public venue is, they could be preparing to speak to an audience. Definitely they could be with somebody. If my husband is with me, he would need to be able to communicate with me because I'm hearing impaired. Or if I'm with my children, they would need to be able to communicate with me because I'm hearing impaired. In fact, everyone that I am with would need to be able to communicate with me by not having a mask on because I'm hearing impaired and I read lips. So I guess if you guys need to go grocery shopping, come with me. And cannot medically tolerate a face covering. Again, that applies to me. Not that anybody deserves to know the reason for that. Certainly not the government, and no private business has the reason to know that. So how exactly is it that we could find in the court of law a business guilty of a misdemeanor for violating this when they would be held accountable for letting a person in without a mask who is required to wear one, but it's none of their business, nor are they allowed to even ask to be able to identify those who are not required to wear a mask? See the problem here? So, businesses, if I were you, I would err on the side of constitutional liberties and not open yourself up to a ton of lawsuits, because that's what you're going to get if you try to stop people from coming in who are clearly exempt from this, and they don't have to prove it to you. There's nothing on here that says that the individual who is exempt has to prove it to you. The interesting thing then is that under 3B, the governor seems to think that we're going to just have some summary, meaning, without due process, temporary suspensions of business licenses to operate, including but not limited to liquor licenses. Personally, I'm not a fan of alcohol, so I don't really carry the way on that, except for the fact that, well, is it the government's job to tell us what to do on a regular basis and touch on every single area of our lives? I don't really think so. So the interesting thing, though, and something that we should be quite happy about, is that our governor, when issuing this at 9:43 a.m. today or yesterday, who knows now, she did put paragraph 6 in there. And paragraph 6 says that nothing in this order shall be taken to abridge protections guaranteed by the state or federal constitution under these emergency circumstances. Good thing is, the Constitution, now where did I have that? Yes, oh, here it is. The U.S. Constitution and the state constitution don't actually change during times of emergency. Isn't that great? So, although we seem to have a qualifying clause in here, it's actually not qualifying anything. It's just, what it means is, nothing in this order can be taken to abridge protections guaranteed by the state or federal constitution. Funny thing is that she focuses on the protections guaranteed to us, meaning let's focus in on that, so almost to say that the people have to prove that they have the right to do something and that it's protected in the Constitution. Interesting. So, Mike, if you happen to be going to the kitchen, I realized I don't have any backup water in here. Thank you, babe. Okay, so we'll come back to that thought in a minute. So the interesting thing about all of this is, the governor put in there, the Constitution has to be respected, right? So on to to break from that analysis just for a minute, it's important that we look at, oh shoot, I didn't post that screenshot. Can you post that screenshot in my comments, the one that you took where it says, where she's saying this is the law?
What do you mean, the multiple 5-6 photos we have? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Oops, I just stepped on my dog. Okay, so, Angie Christine, about the MeWe post, I can only see two posts at a time for some reason, and it's the same two for quite a while now. Your comment about a call to action, hopefully you can remind me, comment back at the end when I'm going to take some questions, because we do have some good tools to use for calls to action, and I'll try to work on some additional ones, but at least there's something out there that I can direct you to about that. So the interesting thing is, I want to point you guys to the both the Michigan Supreme Court and the Michigan Court of Appeals, where the legislature has this lawsuit against the governor. So was it yesterday's press conference that she did this? Mm-hmm. Okay. So in yesterday's press conference, the governor was telling everyone that you have to wear a mask and it's the law. And I want to say our state attorney general also said when Donald Trump came to visit the Ford Motor Company that because he wasn't going to wear a mask, he was violating the law, because it's a law in Michigan to wear a mask. Interesting thing is that both of those individuals, the governor and the state attorney general, went to law school and they hold law degrees, and they've been sworn in to practice law in the United States, in the state of Michigan. And interesting. Yes, indeed it is, because I wasn't planning on talking about this one, but it seems a little relevant now. Oh, let's see. If I need to go off my memory, that'd be a little challenging. So I want to say it is MCL 8.8, where we define, okay, so let me back up and say, I take for granted what the law is, right? I'm an attorney. I've been doing this for years and years and years. So what we have in general, right, is we have state statutes. Here in Michigan, we call them MCLs, Michigan Codified Law. So that is where a bill has been introduced into the legislature, into one house of the legislature, it passes there, it goes to the other one, it passes there, it goes to the governor's desk. Either the governor signs it, or it goes back to the legislature, and then they have to pass it by a 2/3 majority vote. And so that would be the normal type of law. We do have the ability to initiate law as a citizen through the petitioning process that is identified for us in the state constitution. But what we just mentioned is like the normal, most common practice, right, for getting a law. Then we have the state constitution, if you're kind of like looking at the hierarchy, okay, so we have state laws. Then the state constitution. The state constitution, I'm going to go over this in a second, but the state constitution, it reigns over the laws. Whatever the state constitution says, the constitution is essentially the contract that we, the people, have with each other and with our elected representatives on how the government is going to function, what limitations are placed upon the government, and specifically what kind of rights that the government has to make sure that they are not infringing upon for us. And so that contract, it reigns over everything that comes below it. Okay, so if you have a law that violates the state constitution, it's unconstitutional and it's not a valid law. So if there was a law that says every person in a suburb has to kill off their firstborn child, okay, that clearly would violate several provisions of the state constitution, and so therefore it's not going to be enforceable. It doesn't matter that the legislature actually passed such a ridiculous thing or that the governor signed it and it technically became a law. It's as though the law never even existed, because the state constitution does not allow that to exist in that format. So you have the state constitution, and then you have the U.S. Constitution up here, okay? So the U.S. Constitution is literally the contract that we, the people, created and signed to form our entire system of government. Literally no government, no federal government, no state government, no local government has any power to rule over us unless they were given that power in the Constitution. So, governments cannot, state and local governments cannot just create additional powers over the people where the U.S. Constitution does not allow it. The U.S. Constitution is literally the supreme law of the land. It says so, like in the words of the Constitution. You can also look up, I want to say the very last sentence or two, definitely the last paragraph of Marbury versus Madison. Very important stuff. Wouldn't take you very long. The whole case is kind of long, but you just skip right to that last paragraph. It'll tell you all that you need to know. Okay, so you have the U.S. Constitution, and then you have the state constitution, and then you have the laws. Now, a law, okay, so Governor Whitmer said in her press conference yesterday that this executive order to wear masks is a law. Under Michigan law, which was enacted in 1982 here in Michigan, a law is defined as A, a public act of the legislature, which we just talked about how that happens, B, an initiated law adopted by the people, which I briefly mentioned to you, that's something that comes out of our state constitution, or C, an executive order of the governor submitted to the legislature pursuant to Section 2 of Article 5 of the State Constitution of 1963 and having the force of law. So, there's this little concept in statutory interpretation that basically says when a legislature references specific things and they're carving out or identifying a particular thing, that they are meaning to do that and not imply other kinds of things, okay? So, in other words, they specifically say a public act of the legislature, an initiated law adopted by the people, and executive orders submitted to the legislature pursuant to Section 2 of Article 5 of the State Constitution of 1963 and having the force of law. Those three things are the only ones that are allowed to be considered law. So if you have an executive order that is not submitted and done pursuant to Article 5, Section 2 of the State Constitution, which, by the way, none of these executive orders that have the emergency powers statutes in them, none of those are submitted to the legislature under Article 5, Section 2. She has not submitted a single one of those under Article 5, Section 2, because Article 5, Section 2 specifically talks about her ability to reorganize portions of the executive branch. Has nothing to do with telling people they have to wear masks or close their businesses or have kids stop going to school or anything else like that, okay? So, our own state law says what she's doing is not the law. So, important distinction here is the governor has basically said, well, I am making these executive orders pursuant to the 1945 Act and the 1976 Act, and yes, she did reference both in here. And so because those statutes say that I have the right to make executive orders and that those will have the full force and effect of law, that means therefore I do. Well, the thing is, the legislature never had the ability to give her that kind of authority in the first place. If the legislature doesn't have the power to do that, then her trying to exercise the power that wasn't actually given to her doesn't mean that it exists any more than what it already did, which it doesn't. She does not have the power to make laws on her own. So, this law was left on the books. In fact, interesting thing, the 1945 Act and the 1976 Act, both of those came before this law, MCL 8.8, was written. So MCL 8.8 that was made effective in 1982, came after the 1976 and the 1945 emergency powers laws. So in other words, the legislature was clarifying that no executive order issued, except for those issued under Article 5, Section 2 of our state constitution, no other executive order has the force and effect of law. They're not laws. Our own state laws tell us that. Okay, so in addition to that, going back to the Michigan Court of Appeals, there was an amicus brief filed by a professor, Richard Primus, and he works for the University of Michigan Law School, okay? In fact, he has taught constitutional law for 19 years there. I'd be interested to know how much time he has spent practicing constitutional law, seeing these cases actually out in the field, so to speak, arguing these cases for real people, for real clients. Not that it matters either way. I'd just be curious. So he submitted this just a few weeks ago on June 22nd, and in here he very clearly says that the governor's COVID-19 orders are not legislative acts. The governor's COVID-19 orders are not legislative acts violating the separation of powers. I just find that interesting. Okay. So, aside from that, I'd also like you to take a look at, which one is this? Okay, on May 29th, Governor Whitmer had her attorneys file a document with the Michigan Supreme Court. This is one that was filed at 2:04 p.m. And in this document, filed by Governor Whitmer's own attorneys, if we go to page 42 of this brief, we can see that they say the legislature wrote or writes the law, the governor follows it, and only the legislature may amend it. So, the legislature writes the law, the governor follows the law, and only the legislature may amend the law. I would agree that's true. So, pretty sure that all of the governor's COVID-19 executive orders have actually tried to amend. Like, that's not distracting to me, since that's the only comment I see is the popcorn eating. Thanks a lot.
That's 10 minutes ago.
Well, it's just popping up now. So, where was I going with that? Thanks a lot. So, every single one of the governor's COVID-19 executive orders is attempting to amend state law. For example, her executive order about FOIA. There's a law, a state law, an act that has broken up into several different pieces called the Freedom of Information Act, and she sets aside that, she amends it with these executive orders, or the Open Meetings Act, where she's allowing Zoom meetings, or the statutes about notaries. And notaries are somehow now allowed to do remote notarizations. So we're changing the law through an executive order, even though the governor's own attorneys write that only the legislature may amend a law. Interesting. Okay, so well, we probably also want to touch base then, since we're on that concept of separation of powers, right? So separation of powers was identified as an issue in like every single brief that's been filed with the Michigan Supreme Court and the Michigan Court of Appeals. So if you want to look to a brief, you can go to restorefreedommi.com and you can see my brief that I filed with the Michigan Court of Appeals in the legislature's lawsuit against the governor. I filed it on June 25th at 12, it's cut off on this page, 12:51 a.m. Wow, seems to be a common thing after midnight. Anyway, so I point out that the separation of powers is more than just a mere term of art. These aren't just words that we throw around. Our country was in fact born out of an executive usurpation of legislative authority. Okay, that's a lot of big words. What does that really mean? Well, there was tyrannical, quote, suspending of our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us, end quote. Where did I get that from? Well, that would be in the Declaration of Independence. That was listed as one of the reasons why we needed to declare our independence, because we had people in the executive role who are suspending our legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate, such as a governor who thinks they have the right to change, modify, erase, create laws when they're in the executive branch. It's also important to note that a constitution's, quote, most basic functions, state constitution, U.S. Constitution, the most basic functions are to create the form and structure of government, to define and limit the powers of government. This is the most basic function of a constitution, is to define and limit the power of government and to provide for the protection of rights and liberties. Those are very important words, because it does not say a constitution's job is to provide for the limitations of our rights and liberties. No, it says it provides for the protection of our rights and liberties, and specifically to limit the powers of government. It also, and by the way, where did I get that? I got that from the case of the 2008 case, Citizens Protecting Michigan's Constitution versus the Secretary of State. I'm sorry, 2018. I think I said 2008. 2018. What is that? Dog, can you move, please, honey? Can you move? Rusty, can you move? Okay. Oh, you're closer to me. Yay. So, if you're looking for that, if you're looking for that case, it is Citizens Protecting Michigan's Constitution versus Secretary of State is a Michigan Supreme Court case. The citation is 503 Mich 42. That's where the case starts, but where I just quoted is on page 54. So, also, a constitution contains, this is a quote, everything that relates to the complete organization of civil government and the principles on which it shall act and by which it shall be bound. The principles upon which the government shall be bound. The government is bound. It doesn't say in this sentence, we're going to list all the ways in which the people are bound. It says the ways in which the government is bound. Well, clearly this must be an old, case that doesn't have any relevance anymore. Oh, actually, that also comes out of the Citizens case that the Michigan Supreme Court decided, I believe it was July 31st, 2018. Still very much relevant. So with these interests in mind, meaning the organization of government and the limits on government, as well as the protections of our rights and liberties, our state constitution was drafted with Article 3, Section 2, which not only distinctly separates the government into three branches of government, but also specifically prohibits, quote, any person exercising powers of one branch from exercising powers properly belonging to another branch, except as expressly provided in this Constitution. Not impliedly provided in the Constitution, expressly provided in the Constitution. That literally means the governor cannot exercise any kind of legislative powers unless there's something in the Constitution that spells out she can do that. There's nothing in the Constitution that says, in times of emergency, our governor may issue executive orders that imitate law. Not a single thing. There's not a single thing in our Constitution that says, if it's for the health and safety of the people, the governor gets to issue executive orders infringing upon our rights. Not at all. She has often been seen as quoting, I want to say it's Article 4, Section 51, about the public health of the state. The interesting thing is that is clearly in Article 4, which deals with the legislation.
Legislature.
Thank you, the legislature. Not the governor. The governor is dealt with in Article 5. The power she keeps talking about is in Article 51. Not that they have the right to do this either, but just food for thought. So there's a lot of different documents that have been filed in court recently, a lot of different discussions being held by supposed experts on the Constitution, where they're spending a lot of time analyzing the various kinds of delegations of power, right? But who cares what different cases say when the text of the Constitution itself is exceedingly clear? It's clear. There's no interpretation needed. The Constitution does not allow for interpretation where interpretation isn't needed. When the words clearly speak for themselves, that's what the court has to be bound by, what everyone has to be bound by. So if you look at Article 5, Section 2 of our state constitution, that's where the governor is allowed to issue executive orders, but that only is for the mere organization of the executive branch and the assignment of functions within the branch. Also, it's, side note for any of the legal nerds in the crowd tonight, footnote 35 of my brief that I filed talks about how in all the delegation arguments that are made, the separation of powers and whether it's a constitutional delegation of power to allow a governor to issue executive orders like this, all the arguments that we've seen so far are trying to argue back and forth about what the standards of delegation of power are, but they're trying to look at they're comparing a constitutional delegation of power, right, of delegation of legislative power to the governor. They're trying to compare that, which is Article 5, Section 2 delegation, right? It's constitutional because it's in the Constitution. They try to compare that to a statutory delegation of power, which is where the legislature, in a law that they drafted, they gave the governor power. It's not constitutional in the same way, because the only reason why Article 5, Section 2 is constitutional is because it's in the Constitution. So when you look at the executive order writing ability that the 1976, the 1945 Act may give her, those aren't constitutional because they're in the Constitution, because they're not in the Constitution. So it's not even the same argument to make. But anyway, I'm a legal nerd, so I won't go down that road too much. So it's also important to note that this is a quote, when the legislative and executive powers are united in the same person or body, there can be no liberty. So much for liberty and justice for all. Because apprehensions may arise, lest the same monarch or senate should enact tyrannical laws to execute them in a tyrannical manner. So, where did I get that from? Well, That would be a case, interestingly enough, called Soap and Detergent. But that is a Michigan Supreme Court case from 1982. So the Michigan Supreme Court has already clearly identified that. So also, if you look at Article 4, Section 1 of our state constitution, Article 5, Section 1, and Article 6, Section 1, each one of those specifically identify the different powers that each branch has for itself. And, quote, the legislative power is the power to determine the interests of the public, to formulate legislative policy, and to create, alter, and repeal laws. The governor has no power to make laws. I'll repeat that one. The governor has no power to make laws. The executive branch may only apply the public policy determined by the legislature and cannot exercise legislative power by creating law or changing the laws enacted by the legislature. Where am I getting that from? Well, that would be from the taxpayers of Michigan against casinos case, where they sued the state of Michigan, and that was a Michigan Supreme Court case from 2004. The second half of that sentence that I was talking about is a different case from 2008, also the Michigan Supreme Court. So the Michigan Supreme Court has said these two things. The legislative power is the power to determine the interests of the public, to formulate legislative policy, and to create, alter, and repeal laws. That's the legislative power. And they went on to say, this is the Michigan Supreme Court, the governor has no power to make laws. Not a little bit, not, it's okay if it's delegated. Literally no power to make laws. The executive branch may only apply the public policy determined by the legislature and cannot exercise legislative power by creating law or changing the laws enacted by the legislature. Our state Supreme Court has already said the governor cannot create laws or change the laws that were enacted by the legislature. Period. So it is interesting that creating laws and changing the laws enacted by the legislature is exactly and precisely what at least 130 of these COVID-19 executive orders from 2020 has been doing. So let's bring that number back. So there's 147 total executive orders. I know that at least 6 of those executive orders are not related to COVID-19. So that's at least down to 147, but there might be less than that, okay? So if we assume between 130 and 141, right, 6 from the 147, that means between 130 and 141 of these executive orders issued so far in 2019 are based on her emergency powers, when in fact, if you total up every single governor, including Whitmer herself, from 1993 all the way through 2019, there were only ever total 605 executive orders, ever. And only 25 of those had anything to do with the executive powers. And our governor, right now, this year, has issued orders that are 6 times the amount of executive orders, all in one part of 1 year so far, as compared to what? The 26, I can't even do the math on that, 26 years of emergency executive orders that came before her. So, a couple of other super recent things to note come out of the Michigan Supreme Court June 4th order, where they were, it's in the legislature's lawsuit against the governor, okay? Now, granted, this is the order where the Supreme Court said, yeah, we're not going to hear this case right now. You can go ahead and have this case heard in the Court of Appeals first, okay? So Justice Bernstein in his concurring decision, agreed that this case presents extremely significant legal issues that affect the lives of everyone living in Michigan today. He also said that he recognized that not all the restrictions from these executive orders have been lessened and acknowledged the possibility of future restrictions being implemented. He saw that coming over a month ago. Then we can turn to Justice Markman's opinion. This is Justice Markman of the Michigan Supreme Court on June 4th. This is a case that is an issue of the greatest practical importance to more than 10 million people in this state. It's the validity of the executive orders declaring a state of emergency and thereby enabling a single public official to restrict and regulate travel. Pretty sure we're starting to get into some of the rights guaranteed to us by the U.S. Constitution here. To restrict and regulate travel, assembly, business operations, educational opportunities, freedoms and civil liberties, and other ordinary aspects of the daily lives of these people, including matters of crime and punishment and public safety. To put it even more specifically, the present application places into question the entirety of the processes and procedures by which the executive orders that have defined nearly every minute and nearly every aspect of the lives of we the people of Michigan for more than the last 2 months were fashioned into law. He continues to say, this is Michigan Supreme Court Justice Markman on June 4th, that our state continues, like the state lives in the state and the government in the state, it continues in the midst of an emergency in which both the lives and the liberties of its people are being lost each day. Justice Zara said of the Michigan Supreme Court on June 4th, this case, the legislature's lawsuit against the governor, presents palpable constitutional questions that are of compelling interest to every resident, business, and employer in Michigan. The instant matter is arguably the most significant constitutional question presented to this court in the last 50 years. And in fact, he continues by saying each resident's personal liberty is at stake. So to all of you employers who literally wrote, hey, Mike, can I see a copy of that letter? I won't identify which employer it was that we are referencing, but I'd like to give the example of the language that was in there that made me want to scream. Oh, but don't worry, Todd. It is not a outburst. Not an outburst. I just wanted to scream. I didn't actually scream. Yes, indeed, about wearing these masks when we have employers that write things like, I appreciate that the summer temperature makes wearing a mask more uncomfortable when you're in a shop with a bunch of machines and it's already hot and there's no air conditioning. However, we cannot and are not going to be flexible in this policy of wearing masks. This is not a political or personal rights issue. It's not a political or personal rights issue. You're right, it's not political. It is a personal rights issue, though. The right to breathe fresh air didn't have to be specifically put into the state or United States Constitution because that's common sense. No one anywhere ever would think you know what? We got to write. Hold on, I can't sign this yet. We got to write down the right to breathe fresh air because at some point in the future, our government might want to make us cover our mouths all day long, where we can't really breathe fresh air. Okay, so to those employers who say this is not a personal rights issue, I'm going to reiterate from the Michigan Supreme Court just last month, each resident's personal liberty is at stake. He also points out that life for the people throughout Michigan was turned on its head on March 10th. Why March 10th? That's the date that the governor issued the, which one was that? That was Executive Order 2020-4. That first state of emergency where this whole problem began. He then points out that the governor issued numerous additional statewide orders generally requiring people to stay home unless their departure from home was essential, closing all non-essential businesses, closing all schools before the end of the school year, and seriously restricting travel, assembly, and other aspects of daily life. He points out that even law and non-emergency medical offices throughout Michigan were closed indefinitely. He also states that no issue is of greater public interest or importance than the resolution of whether the governor was within her constitutional authority to deprive the 10 million plus residents and the thousands of business owners of Michigan of their personal freedom and economic liberty. That one's kind of an important one, so I'm going to repeat that. Again, this is the Michigan Supreme Court. This isn't just something I wrote up myself. I know people like Jack O'Malley want to say that I don't have any kind of experience or expertise and I don't know what I'm talking about, so don't listen to me. Let's listen to the Michigan Supreme Court, okay? This is from June 4th of this year. No issue is of greater public interest or importance than the resolution of whether the governor was within her constitutional authority to deprive the 10 million plus residents and the thousands of business owners of Michigan of their personal freedom and economic liberty. So, constitutional authority. I'm just kind of circle that. That's important. We'll come back to that. Also, he describes that by the court not deciding to take the case essentially right away, it displays insensitivity to the people of the state who are entitled to know with certainty whether the constraints of liberty imposed by the emergency orders under which they labor are constitutionally permissible. He knew that this case needed to be heard back then in the Michigan Supreme Court to settle that issue once and for all. Because it's not just whether the legislature had their feelings hurt or that the delegation of powers was broken, right? That's not the main issue. That's the issue that I started with because that's how the governor's press conference went yesterday, right? It said right on the screen that these executive orders and the requirements to wear masks, that's now a law.
Law of the land.
Oh, law of the land. Oh, I missed that part. Law of the land. You know, law of the land. I seem to remember something about law of the land somewhere in this little document here. Oh, I'm just looking at the United States Constitution if you wanted to try to follow along. If my contacts are working, I might be able to read this. Dang, I really can't see right now. Well, pretty sure that our United States Constitution says that it itself is the law of the land. I think it's literally on the page that I can't read right here because...
Article 6. The Constitution, the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made, or which shall be under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby.
That's where it is. Silly me. Okay, let's try to have my contacts working here a little bit more. So that is Article 6, that Frank was so kind to point out for me. That this Constitution, the United States Constitution, and only the laws of the United States that are made in accordance with the Constitution, not all laws, just the laws that are made in accordance with the Constitution, they are the supreme law of the land. So when a governor says, I'm the dictator of the state of Michigan, and I tell you that you have to do this, you're my subjects, and you have to listen to me, and you have to wear masks everywhere, and it's the law of the land. That funny little pesky thing, I want to say it's, what is it, Article, oops, wrong Constitution, Article 12, Article 11, Section 1 of our state constitution, where the governor and the state attorney general have taken an oath to support the U.S. and Michigan constitutions. Because they took that oath, well, at least once when they were sworn in to practice law in the state of Michigan, and also when they took office, right? And that's, I mean, obviously we know the governor has served in more than one office, so at least the twice, right, for each of them, that they took that oath to uphold the U.S. and Michigan constitutions. They should have read somewhere in there that it's the Constitution and only constitutional laws that are the supreme law of the land. But they missed that one. So Justice Viviano of our state Supreme Court on June 4th wrote this in the legislature's lawsuit against the governor. This case impacts the constitutional liberties of every one of Michigan's nearly 10 million citizens. And that it is indisputable that these orders impinge on the constitutional liberties of our citizens. Is anyone still thinking this is not clear? You'll have to tell me. I guess I can't see. Oh, let's see. And by the way, in this very case, they also, the Michigan Supreme Court, they're also pointing out that it is the legislature who has the constitutional role as the branch with the authority to make, alter, amend, or repeal laws. And they're referring to their own Michigan Supreme Court case from 1933 when they say that. Oh yeah, this good stuff right here. And see, which justice was this? This is also Justice Viviano. And he says that this case involves some of the most important legal principles that can arise in a free society. He continues by saying that these issues and how we decide them will have a direct impact on the constitutional liberties of every person who lives or owns property in or simply visits our state while the restrictions are in place. That's important. He's identifying it's not just the Michigan residents that are impacted, it's the people who visit our state who are having their constitutional liberties impacted. On a fundamental and practical level, they impact how our friends and neighbors live their lives on a daily basis, where they can go, with whom, how, and when they can practice their religion, whether they can go out to eat or to the hardware store or to the beach. In short, nearly every decision they make about nearly everything that they do. Our courts exist our court, just the Supreme Court alone is saying, our court exists to vindicate the constitutional rights of our citizens. So, I want to bring us back to the constitutional authority. And this was, again, Justice Markman. Nope, this is Justice Zara. So, he said that no issue is of greater public interest or importance than the resolution of whether the governor was within her constitutional authority to deprive the 10 million plus residents and the thousands of business owners of Michigan of their personal freedom and economic liberty. So, again, I want to point out that constitutions are meant to define and limit the powers of government, but provide protections for the rights and liberties of the people. Constitutions, that contract we have that allows us to function as a government, is there to constrain the government, but protect the ability of the people to live freely. So, to that extent, he's talking about what constitutional authority does the governor have to do this? Because without a constitutional authority to do anything, well, if you don't have a constitutional authority to do something, then you can't do it. It doesn't matter if you're the governor, it doesn't matter if you're on the local school board, or if you serve as the state attorney general, or the secretary of state, or a state representative, or it doesn't matter. If you do not have constitutional authority to do what you are doing, then you don't have the authority to do it, and you can't do it. And you're violating our Constitution. We don't have to prove to you, as government officials, that we have these certain limited rights. You have to prove that you have the constitutional authority to act in such a manner that you claim to be able to do so, but also to act in such a manner that can limit our freedom and our liberty. So where in the state constitution, where in the U.S. Constitution does it say that either a governor or a legislature, it doesn't matter which, where does it say that a governing body of any kind or a government official of any kind can limit our constitutional protections during a state of emergency? Oh, I know. We can look at Article 4, Section 39 of our state constitution. That says continuity of government in emergencies. Okay, must be in here, right? It gives the government more authority. In order to ensure continuity of state and local government operations in periods of emergency. Nope, it just talks about ensuring that we have government functioning. Wait a minute, hasn't the governor tried in these executive orders to say that government offices should be closed to the public? I want to say that it was really challenging to even get my driver's license renewed this year, since my birthday was a week ago today. I think that violates Article 4, Section 39. Interesting. While we're at it, I mean, we have the state constitution in front of us. Let's look at Article 1, Section 1 of our state constitution. Well, yeah, let's go there first. All political power is inherent in the people. All, okay? Article 3, Assembly. The people have the right peaceably to assemble, to consult for the common good, to instruct their representatives, and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Well, guess what? I guess that means no matter what is going on, no matter what the governor or any other government official tells us to do, if you're with me collecting signatures for their Store Freedom Initiative, we are petitioning the government for a redress of grievances, so we're covered. But again, we're already covered under the right to peaceably assemble, right? So, funny thing is, I don't see, it's Declaration of Rights. I'm not seeing the exception for times of emergency, are you? Did you see that in there? No? Okay. Article 1, Section 4, we have the freedom of worship and religious beliefs. It's interesting that it says that every person shall be at liberty to worship God according to the dictates of his own conscience. So it doesn't say that you can only go to church if you're going to wear masks, or if you're going to sit in every other row, or if you're going to stay 6 feet away from everyone else. It does not say that they can dictate when you go or how you go. It literally says every person shall be at liberty to worship God according to the dictates of his own conscience. Interesting thing. It says the civil and political rights, privileges, and capacities of no person shall be diminished or enlarged on account of his religious belief. So if I believe God wants us to worship together, to use fellowship, to grow together, to unmask our faces, to be open and honest with each other, to grow together, to be able to read each other's faces, to be able to fully communicate with each other. Seems to say here that the governor can't do anything about that. And the interesting thing is the title. For those people who say, oh, your right to worship is just, you could do that at home. Interesting thing, though, is this is freedom of worship and religious belief. It's not just the right to believe what you want. It's the right to worship how you believe you should be worshiping. No one else gets to tell you you have to wear a mask in order to go to church. We also have the freedom of speech, right? Every person may freely speak, write, express, and publish his views on all subjects, being responsible for the abuse of such right. And no law shall be enacted to restrain or abridge the liberty of speech or of the press. Since we're here, let's take a look at the preamble of the state constitution. We, the people of the state of Michigan, grateful to Almighty God for the blessings of freedom, and earnestly desiring to secure these blessings undiminished. Not diminished just for that little bit while there's that COVID stuff going around and the governor gets to control us. No. Undiminished, to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution. This Constitution that restricts the government and protects our rights was based upon the concept that our blessings of freedom are not to be diminished at all. The whole point of this government is that we will not have our freedom diminished. We didn't get our freedom from the government. We got those blessings of liberty and freedom from God. It's about time we stand up as God's army and do something about it.
Well, it's a good segue to a question. Lots of people have asked. You've explained the problem. How do we fix it? How do we get our freedom back?
How do we fix it? First of all, don't wear a mask unless you feel like you are it's medically necessary for you to do so. If you own a business, do not put up a sign that says people have to wear masks in order to enter your establishment. Do not question people or stop people from entering your business because they are not wearing a mask. First of all, the executive order doesn't even allow you to do that. But second of all, the Constitution rules over all. So you have no right as a business owner to allow the governor to simply issue these directives where you're just simply following orders. Are you risking things? You know what? Yes. We are all risking things at this point. We are all risking everything. And if we don't stand up for these rights now, we're risking the very future of our entire state and on a bigger level, our entire country. Really? Oh, that's cool. My computer's frozen. Oh, maybe I'm back. Okay. That truth was apparently way too much for my computer to handle. That's lovely. What can you do? Well, I want to say Angie from MeWe was talking about that they have a specific call to action where they're contacting each of their sheriff's departments about not enforcing these illegal and unconstitutional executive orders. And to that point, I have that's the 11-page letter that many of you know. I wrote to every single sheriff's department in the entire state, every single police department, every single prosecuting attorney's office, and every single city attorney's office. That was Mother's Day. That's when I finished that up and sent that out to the first batch of them before the emails were rejected because we don't have ready access to our government officials. Anyway, so that is available on our,
Posting it right now.
Oh, apparently Frank's posting it, but is that also for future reference already on the Restore Freedom MI, Mike? Is there a document section that's already live that we pulled over from Stop COVID Chaos?
Yes.
Okay, so that document I just referenced is also available. I want to say it's called Letter to Prosecutors is what the PDF is saved as.
I just posted the link to it as well.
And so that's a good start. But all the stuff I just mentioned to you right now, oh my gosh, I'd like to think that I'll have enough time. I will try very hard to put it all in one document for you so that you can reference all of this and be able to hand it out. That's what you need to do. In the meantime, I told you how to find each and every one of these things. You're going to have to hit pause and rewind quite a bit on this video, but it's worth it, isn't it, to put in the time and effort on that so that we can secure our blessings of freedom. Make sure you are letting every single law enforcement agency, every single business owner that you know, let them know that they don't have the right to force anyone to wear a mask. Period. Make sure you are calling your legislators. Hey, if you're lucky enough to live in the Greenville area and you have Jim Lauer as the state rep, I want to say he said something about that on social media today, that he's not going to be wearing a mask, and good luck enforcing such a requirement because it's not constitutional. I actually had the pleasure of speaking with him on the phone about it afterwards because I wanted to make sure that I understood that post correctly. And that's definitely his position. So I'm hoping that I just simply haven't encountered the other state representatives and senators and other government officials who are going to stand up and say, enough is enough. We all took an oath to defend the U.S. and Michigan constitutions, and the governor does not have the authority to act in this way, and the people on top of that have specific freedoms identified in the U.S. Oops, sorry, kicking people here. In the U.S. and Michigan constitutions that are being infringed upon by these executive orders. Do we have any other questions?
Lots.
Oh, yay.
So there are 8 questions all around the same genre. Can we have Governor Whitmer arrested for any crime?
Oh, man, my contacts are really freaking out. Can we have the governor arrested? Well, I think it's pretty clear that she is, at the very least, of course, at 1:30 in the morning. Oh, I should probably plug in my Chromebook so we don't, there we go. Okay. So at the very least, we have, what is that? 18 USC section 281? I've said it before, so any of you who have watched my videos on when I've answered that question before, it's the same one. I just don't remember it. 18 USC section 241 that says that if 2 or more persons conspire to injure or oppress or threaten or intimidate any person in the free exercise or enjoyment of any right or privilege secured to him by the Constitution or the laws of the United States, that they shall be fined under this law or imprisoned not more than 10 years or both. And in fact, if death results from the acts committed here, let's see, or if such acts include kidnapping or an attempt to kidnap, let's see, or an attempt to kill, they shall be fined under this title or imprisoned for any term of years or for life or both, or may be sentenced to death. So, to the extent that a death results from this, because it's not actually healthy to wear a mask all day long.
What about the seniors?
Oh, don't even get me started on that. I can't. That's not... Anyway. To the extent that a death results from this, when you have 2 or more persons, so maybe, say, the governor and the attorney general, who are conspiring to injure, oppress, or threaten, or intimidate any person in the free exercise or enjoyment of any right or privilege secured to them by the Constitution, they either get to go to prison or they get put to death. That's what the federal laws say. And you can look at 18 USC section 241 for that. So, yeah. Yeah. I think our governor and our attorney general absolutely could be arrested immediately.
Follow-up question, ask who would do the arresting.
Well, let's see, I would like to say, who could do the arresting? Do you think we have any law enforcement officials in our state that have taken an oath to uphold and defend the U.S. or Michigan constitutions?
How about one that ran for senator? Mike Bouchard. Oakland County.
Wait, I know. Hold on. Let's relook at that. Article 11, Section 1. Article 11, Section 1. All officers, legislative, executive, and judicial, before entering upon the duties of the respective offices, shall take and subscribe the following oath or affirmation. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this state. I want to say that means that literally every executive branch member has done that. So I'm thinking that's actually all of our law enforcement officers in Michigan. That's a good start.
Can we send a corporate letter to Meijer, Menards, Family Fare, Costco, Tractor Supply, all of these companies which are blocking individuals from coming in without a mask?
So I don't know if Costco has changed its policy, but what I can tell you is that the last time that as a customer of Costco, I received a have exceptions written right into their corporate policy. So to the extent that an employee is trying to stop you from coming in just because you're not wearing a mask, they're violating their corporate policy. So writing corporate about it, you can write corporate about it, but their corporate policy already accounts for the fact that some people aren't going to be wearing masks. Let's see. I'm way too tired to keep up with whatever you do. The rest of that.
It is a full list of stores.
Full list of stores. Is the question, am I going to write that?
Is there a letter that we can send as part of the MeWe, the Lantern Group, or us as citizens to send to the stores? Would that prosecutor's letter work?
Well, possibly. I think what really needs to happen is that I have to have time to put together in one document all the stuff I just shared tonight. So, I work 7 days a week. I sleep maybe 2 to 4 hours every single night. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah.
You're too tired to do the math?
We'll go with the Beatles song. You work 8 days a week.
Yes.
I'm tired enough to say that I do work 8 days a week. Yes. And I worked on my birthday. I worked on my husband's birthday. I worked on Mother's Day. I worked on Father's Day. I worked on Memorial Day. What?
You worked on my birthday.
I worked on your birthday. Mm-hmm. Not that we knew each other, but
my birthday's Mother's Day.
I worked on Memorial Day.
4th of July.
4th of July. I worked on 4th of July. I work every single day on this cause. Nothing I'm getting paid for. I'm not getting paid like the legislators or police officers or anybody else, right? I receive donations, which, by the way, thank you to those of you who are still donating. We have the Restore Freedom Initiative donations, which are geared towards solely the expenses of the Restore Freedom Initiative constitutional amendment petition that strips away any of the lack of clarity that the governor seems to think is in there. And as far as this kind of work, when I spend entire days combing through all of the laws and executive orders and everything else, answering, I can't even guesstimate on how many calls I answered today about this very question about masks.
We lost count.
Yeah. My phone literally has hundreds of phone calls and text messages just today alone. People I haven't spoken to in years. And I haven't even gotten through all of them. In fact, there's probably still at least 25 different people texting. I know I have at least 9 voicemails I haven't gotten to.
Your last call was, what, 12:05?
Well, yeah, the last person called me literally right before I hit the go live button here. So,
Follow-up another question. Why is the Michigan
well, hold on.
Supreme
My
Court-
point is, I will get to writing that as soon as I possibly can, but I need people to recognize that I'm running the whole constitutional amendment petition, which, by the way, if you are ticked off about this, if you want to make sure you are doing your part to ensure our freedom, come on board with the Restore Freedom Initiative. Don't just do one little tiny piece like the repeal of the 1945 Act. You could do that too. But come on board to fix this whole thing once and for all. The whole thing. We have a bunch of different places we can fit you in. In fact, if you go to the restorefreedommi.com, restoredfreedommi.com page. We have a Get Involved button, Get Involved tab, and there's a whole laundry list of different ways that you can get involved, and each has a link on how to go ahead and proceed with each and every one of those things. So we have that, and like I said, all the work that I've been doing on this for free, it is very greatly appreciated when people do donate, so I can try to cover the costs of the thousands of pages of paper that I've printed, the multiple toners I've had to replace. I luckily have not had to buy new computer equipment, but the very Chromebook I'm doing this live on has crashed multiple times in the last few weeks. Anyway, donations are definitely accepted, but you're gonna have to give me time, because I am one person, right? And for those of you who have been a little bit too impatient with me because you want to know the exact numbers of this, or you want the exact data for that, or you want answers about your employer or whatever, please know that I am doing my absolute best to answer your questions, even if I know that you've been going behind my back on Facebook telling everyone that you think that I should not have done this or that video, or I'm a bad leader or whatever, and then you turn around and call me and take up my time and ask me for legal advice on the phone the very next day or a couple days later. I'm still answering your questions because it's the right thing to do. Because it's more than the right thing to do. And I'm hoping that each one of you are going to start recognizing that you need to start doing the right thing. It's not easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it. But we all need to pitch in and do the right thing here, okay? So start writing your own letters for now. Start combing through all the citations I gave you until I'm able to put it all together for you. You can do this. The stuff I read to you, it's not, a pie in the sky type of you have to be super, super intelligent to understand, or you have to be, highly educated. Every single person here in Michigan has the right to understand their rights, as well as the limitations on government, and to be able to explain that to others who are trying to infringe upon those rights, period. You don't need an attorney to do that. I am willing to help, but the more volunteers I have come on board with the petition and with the legal work, the better. If you're a legal assistant or a legal secretary or a paralegal, heck, you're another attorney and you want to come on board and help me day in and day out, that would be awesome. We could get a lot more done. Absolutely. If you're just someone that likes to organize, or you want to help us deliver petitions, or you want to help in any kind of other way with that, great. Shoot, if you're someone who loves to plant things and trim grass and pull weeds and whatever, help clean houses, I would love help with that, because the more I'm not doing that stuff, the more I'm doing this stuff. But when I'm not earning money for this, I can't pay for that. So if we all can use some teamwork to get this done, I can get it done quicker. Otherwise, you guys are just going to have to wait for me.
Tongue-in-cheek question, how in the world did Whitmer and Nessel pass the bar?
How did... Can't even say that with a straight face. How did Nessel and how did Whitmer pass the bar? Well, I honestly don't know. Period. I don't know. That's a tough question. I've passed 2 bars in my lifetime with flying colors on the first try, 2 different states, and was admitted to all the other jurisdictions. It wasn't easy by any stretch of the imagination, but I definitely had to know the law and I had to know the Constitution. So how they are licensed attorneys, good question.
Last question, dealing with the Supreme Court, why are they dragging their feet? Why isn't it taking so long to decide the legislature's case?
Unfortunately, if you're paying attention, you would have understood that I actually quoted from 4 of the 7 Michigan Supreme Court justices, so that means a majority. But for some reason, despite recognizing some of those very things, Justice Bernstein actually ended up putting his vote in favor of allowing or requiring the Court of Appeals to rule on the case first. Interestingly enough, is that the Supreme Court was saying that Well, let's see here. Essentially, they were all saying that the Court of Appeals needs to hurry things along, right? It's not going to be done on a, I want to say it was a typical conveyor belt type of approach to a case that the majority in this case said, no, it won't be handled that way. The Court of Appeals will handle it very quickly. And yet, I can tell you, I filed my brief last month, and I want to say arguments aren't even scheduled until next month. So I'm not sure what the holdup is. I don't know why the Court of Appeals is dragging their feet. And I don't know why the Supreme Court is not jumping in to say, you know what? This is ridiculous. We need to do something. It's a good question. That's the last question.
You covered all of them in some form or capacity. That's the last question.
That's awesome. Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. Obviously, if I'm exhausted, you must be exhausted because it's super late at night. But thanks for hanging in there so that you can understand what your rights are. In the end, unless you feel like you are immunocompromised and that it is in your best interest to wear a mask, please don't wear one. Don't be bullied into it. Don't be pushed into it. Don't be convinced that you have to do it. It's not the law. I don't care what a piece of paper says. I don't care what the governor says. I don't care what the state attorney general says because they can't read the Constitution. So just know that those are your rights. And if you are a law enforcement official and you are upholding the Constitution and you are reprimanded or threatened in your position at work in any way, shape, or form, please call 616-303-0183. I'm not going to tolerate law enforcement officials who are upholding the U.S. Constitution being punished in any way. Absolutely not. Especially when we have all this other stuff going on, when we are allowing rioting in the streets, when we have we're taking votes on whether we're going to dismantle police agencies across the state, or even talking about such a topic. Keep that in mind. And if you see an officer who is actually doing their job and upholding the law and upholding the U.S. and Michigan Constitution, please thank them. But also let them know if they're getting in trouble with their superior officers or the municipality or whatever for merely upholding the U.S. or Michigan Constitution, you tell them to give me a call. I'm sick of this. We're not going to stand by anymore and watch this happen. And I'm not going to sell you a bunch of $40 t-shirts to talk about how awesome it's going to be to do something. We're actually just going to do it. And I don't always wear a suit. In fact, I mostly don't wear a suit because I'm not in court and I'm a real person. And I do exhibit emotion. And I do get upset when people lie and cheat and steal. And I don't like it when politicians do it. And I don't like it when regular people do it. And to me, it doesn't really matter. Either way, it's still wrong. So let's do this together. Let's do it the right way. And for those of you out there who are going to go on my feed and say all kinds of awful things about me, just keep in mind, I literally get like 10,000 notifications a day. I hardly see any of them. I haven't even been able to see all my birthday messages. So if you did not get a notification that I hit the like button to the birthday message you wrote on my wall, please know that I just didn't see it. And feel free to send me a text. I'd love to hear from you. Yeah, I would love to hear from real people that just want to talk to me about normal stuff like saying happy birthday to me, where I'm not necessarily answering a legal question. I'll answer the legal questions too, but I miss that part of just being a normal human with the rest of everyone. So anyway, please make sure to keep in mind that we have the RestoreFreedomMI.com website, where my K. Henry Forum, my website, is actually going to be kind of merging in with that. The Stop COVID Chaos website, that's been a one-stop shop since April 30th. That's being merged into the RestoreFreedomMI.com. And all the phone numbers and emails for various different people you might be trying to reach within our entirely volunteer organization are listed in a picture, if you will, on my Facebook, what is that called, banner?
Page, group, yeah, banner.
Okay. And we also have all the contact information listed at restorefreedommi.com on the Contact Us page. So there's nothing else, right?
No.
Good. All right. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful night. Have a great weekend. Five times. I can't go to bed. It won't let me. Frank.
Close your thing. That'll shut your computer down.
No, it won't.